Hey guys, tonight we ride. You're perched atop a rather uncooperative Mongolian pony. Its thick winter coat puffed out like an angry yak and its general attitude somewhere between stubborn and mildly offended. Around you, the steppe stretches endlessly in all directions, flat, frosty, and hauntingly quiet, save for the distant clatter of hooves. A low wind whistles past your ears, carrying with it the scent of leather, smoke, and something faintly barnyard. The stars are already beginning to glitter above, piercing through the wide blue dome of twilight like pinholes in paper. You pull your cloak tighter and adjust the strange, heavy pendant hanging from your neck, a small rectangular slab of gilded metal with odd, angular script carved deep into its surface. This, believe it or not, is your passport. And in the 13th century Mongol Empire, this little hunk of metal is more powerful than most swords. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your pony grunts as you nudge it forward, hooves crunching over frozen turf. The wind settles, and slowly, like the horizon itself is tilting forward, we slip back in time to a world where messages had to be carried by hand across thousands of miles with the help of a surprisingly efficient system the Mongols invented, the yam. No, not the root vegetable. Yam, spelled S-Y-A-M, was the name for the sprawling relay network that Genghis Khan and his successors built across their empire. Picture it like the ancient world's FedEx, only with fewer trucks and more yurts. It stretched from Korea to the edges of Hungary, with way stations scattered every 25 to 30 miles. At each post, fresh horses, food, rest, and sometimes slightly annoyed administrators who would check your credentials, which is where your metal passport came in.
See, the Mongols knew that communication was the lifeblood of control. If they wanted to run the biggest contiguous land empire in history, which, modestly, they did, they needed messages to move fast, messengers to survive the journey, and locals not to impale said messengers on sight. Enter the gerege, your golden tablet of authority. Imagine showing up to a foreign town with a metal plaque that basically said, "Hi, I speak for the great Khan, and if you don't give me a place to sleep and some dumplings, he'll know." These plaques were often about the size of a hand, engraved with Mongolian script, and sometimes inlaid with gold or silver. They weren't just decorative, they had weight, both literal and political. Holding one could get you supplies, fresh mounts, or even a military escort. Not holding one could get you, well, lost, or worse. Historians still argue whether the gerege system was based on earlier Chinese or Persian courier traditions, or if it was something truly original the Mongols supercharged into greatness. Either way, it worked. Some reports say a message could travel over 200 miles in a single day, which, considering that medieval England still hadn't figured out standardized road signs, is frankly a bit embarrassing. The whole system was so efficient that even people the Mongols didn't particularly like sometimes used it. Persian scholars, Christian envoys, Muslim merchants, and slightly sunburnt Venetian adventurers, cough, Marco Polo, all relied on the yam to get around. Some even left accounts of the stations, felt tents stocked with supplies, guards checking tokens, horses snorting in the cold, and of course, bowls of fermented mare's milk that you were strongly encouraged to drink with a smile. But back to you, dear traveler. As your horse trudges forward, you spot a flicker of firelight in the distance, the next station. You loosen your reins and ready your plaque. There's something almost comforting about knowing that in this vast and often unforgiving land, there's an organized bureaucracy ready to receive you, or at least someone with a kettle and another grumpy pony. It's getting colder now. You tug your hat down and exhale a misty sigh. The stars are clearer than ever. And as the station grows nearer, you think, for something as dull-sounding as a passport system, this whole setup is surprisingly elegant. Also, you suspect the pony might be judging you, but that's fine. You've got a golden plaque, and he doesn't.
You approach the outpost under the early night sky, that kind of blue where the light hasn't quite given up, but the stars have already claimed the high ground. The Yam station stands squat and practical, half tent, half hut, with thick felt walls and a low roof weighed down by stones. Smoke curls from a central hole, the scent of burning dung and boiling fat wafting toward you. It's not exactly the Ritz, but you weren't expecting turn-down service. As you swing off your horse, a youth in a patched tunic emerges. His expression is unreadable, equal parts curiosity and the kind of low-key suspicion that comes from being posted in the middle of nowhere with only cranky travelers for company. You hold up your gerege, the weight of the bronze catching the firelight in a flicker. Without a word, the boy nods and disappears inside. Moments later, a bowl of irag, that's fermented mare's milk to you, is placed in your hand. It fizzes faintly. You nod gratefully, like someone pretending to enjoy kombucha at a work party. Inside, the station's interior is warmer than expected. Rugs cover the dirt floor, and a brazier hisses gently in the corner. Maps are nailed to wooden frames, coarse illustrations of rivers, hills, and someone's rather aggressive doodle of a camel. A wooden box holds spare reins and wax tablets. Nearby, a messenger snores gently beneath a heavy wool cloak, his leather courier pouch still slung over his chest. You're not alone in this strange network. At any given moment, dozens, maybe hundreds of riders are crisscrossing the empire with orders, reports, marriage proposals, or the occasional package of suspicious dried meat. The Yam is the web that binds them. And thanks to the gerege, you're a welcome spider. Historians still debate how much of the system was centralized. Some argue Genghis Khan himself micromanaged the route layouts and resource allocations like a medieval Amazon Prime. Others believe it was more of a loosely supervised network, managed by local governors and relay captains. But one thing's clear, even in an era before paper maps were common, the Yam functioned with astonishing precision. You sip the irag, no, it does not get better, and glance toward the messenger's pouch. It's stained with sweat and dust. Inside? Possibly nothing more than a polite, "We're out of grain, please send millet." Or maybe a top-level order to mobilize an army. That's the beauty of the system. Every message could be the one that turns a village into a battlefield. And what about the gerege itself? It wasn't a simple all-access pass. Different plaques had different levels of authority. Some were issued to religious envoys or imperial scouts, others to tax collectors, everyone's favorite visitor. The highest grade plaques could command tribute or requisition supplies from local governors. They often included warnings like, "Disobey the bearer of this and suffer the wrath of the great Khan." Subtle. Some even had bells attached, tiny tinkling charms that weren't just decorative. The sound was a warning. Someone important was coming. You can imagine the stress this created for rural hosts. Picture yourself elbow deep in mutton stew, hearing that chime on the wind. Time to fluff the pillows and hide the good cheese. You set down your bowl, stretching out your arms and legs. One of the station guards, a man with a thick braid and suspiciously symmetrical cheekbones, nods toward a bedroll. You thank him, settling in beside the brazier. Your gerege lies close to your chest, the metal warm now from body heat. There's something oddly comforting about this whole setup. The Mongol Empire wasn't just a machine of war, it was a machine of motion, of logistics. For all the thunderous cavalry charges and flaming arrows,
They also perfected the boring bits, the infrastructure, roads, relays, timetables. It's all very spreadsheet energy and weirdly impressive. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of wind through steppe grass. Outside, your pony snorts in protest, probably about the ARAG, or just its general existence. Tomorrow, you'll ride on. Another 25 miles, another fire, another bowl of something vaguely goat-flavored. But tonight, wrapped in felt and history, you begin to understand how a Khan ruled a continent, not with fear, but with delivery schedules.
You wake before the sun. There's a strange hush in the relay station, the kind of pre-dawn silence that makes even breathing feel like too much noise. You pack your gear with quiet, practiced movements. The messenger is still snoring. The guard from last night is brewing something that smells like roasted barley mixed with old socks. You give him a nod, and he responds with a sleepy grunt that somehow manages to mean, good luck out there. As you step outside, the air is brittle and sharp, like it hasn't been breathed in yet. Frost clings to the grasses, catching the moonlight in delicate, icy outlines. You swing onto your horse, who gives you that look again, and set off into the open steppe, your gerege tucked safely beneath your cloak. The roads of the Mongol Empire aren't roads in the way you might imagine. No cobblestone lanes or wooden mile markers. Instead, they're invisible arteries, etched into collective memory. Riders learn the way through repetition, through watching the stars, the shape of hills, the flow of rivers. You guide your horse along a dirt path so faint it feels more imagined than real, but somehow it works. Historians still argue whether these postal routes were fully standardized or adapted fluidly by local knowledge. One thing's for sure, riders had to rely on both muscle memory and natural signposts. Trees bent in windward directions, bird migrations, even the way snow melted in spring, all part of a vast, unspoken GPS system with no rerouting option. After an hour or so, the steppe widens into a windswept plain. There's nothing to interrupt your view but a distant herd of wild gazelles and a single, oddly defiant yak standing atop a hill like it owns the postal service. A tailwind pushes you onward, your horse falling into a steady rhythm that matches your heartbeat. In your bag, you've got a folded piece of parchment, sealed with wax. It's not your job to know what it says, but you wonder anyway. A trade agreement? A complaint about goat theft? A marriage proposal that will go hilariously unrequited? The Mongol postal system didn't discriminate. It carried everything from imperial decrees to love letters scribbled by teenage scribes with crushes and poor penmanship.
And while most empires leaned heavily on message runners or sporadic maritime messengers, the Mongols institutionalized speed. The yam relay stations were spaced roughly every 25 to 30 miles, just far enough to exhaust a horse, but close enough to keep the rider moving. Each station stocked food, fresh mounts, and minimal conversation. One quirky tidbit: riders sometimes carried arrow-shaped batons as visual markers of urgency. Yes, literal pointy sticks that said, "This is a rush order." Others wore specific sashes or seals. The higher the clearance, the faster the relay captain snapped to attention. No email spam filters here, just the terrifying efficiency of the Great Khan's network. There's a rhythm to all this. The hoofbeats, the wind, the quiet hum of your own thoughts. You start to lose track of time, lulled by the endless horizon and the peculiar comfort of forward motion. You spot a lone gur, a traditional Mongolian tent off in the distance, smoke curling from its center like a sleepy question mark. You don't stop, not unless you need to. The yam is all about momentum. You pass herders moving sheep along narrow ravines, their boots crusted in mud and their faces hidden beneath thick woolen scarves.
One man raises a hand to you and squints at your chest, probably trying to spot the glint of your gerege. It's a universal gesture in these parts. Show me your papers, except friendlier and with more livestock. The horse begins to tire around midday, just as the clouds gather into a sullen mass overhead. Rain is never pleasant on the steppe. It's the sort that soaks into your bones through layers of supposedly waterproof felt. You grit your teeth and lean forward, urging your mount a little faster, imagining the hot broth waiting at the next station. The Mongol riders had a saying, "It's not the distance that breaks you, it's the wind." You're starting to believe it. The gusts turn sideways, pushing grit into your eyes and tangling your hair. Still, you ride on. That's the job. Somewhere in this gale is a metaphor about life and endurance, but you're too cold to find it. You settle instead for humming a barely remembered tune, something you probably heard last winter when a lute player got stuck in your village due to snow. When the next yam station comes into view, just a cluster of rounded rooftops barely distinguishable from the hillside, you feel a wave of relief. You've made it, again. You dismount with stiff legs, offering your reins to a stable boy no older than 13. His eyebrows vanish when he sees your gerege. He runs off to fetch food and fire. And as you walk inside the warm shelter, steam rising from your damp sleeves, you realize something odd. You're starting to enjoy this strange rhythm. The gallop, pause, gallop life of a Mongol courier might be repetitive, but it has its charm. Like a song with only one verse that somehow never gets old.
You're seated cross-legged on a wool mat, your boots steaming quietly near the fire pit when a bowl of hot broth is placed in your hands. It's mostly onions and mutton, with a few mystery vegetables that may or may not be roots. You take a sip, and it tastes like survival, which, at this point, is exactly what you need. The yam station is small, a squat timber structure with thick felt lining the inner walls. There's a skylight hole above the hearth, and you watch the wind toss smoke around before it escapes. A kettle hisses quietly on the coals. You start to thaw. Nearby, another rider sits sharpening a knife with the focus of someone who's been alone for far too long. He nods at you. There's no small talk. Not out of rudeness, but efficiency. Every minute here is one less minute on the road. You both know it. The Mongol postal system, you begin to realize, was less about individual comfort and more about relentless function. You wonder if the great Khan ever pictured people like you, wind-chapped, saddle-sore, slurping soup with one hand while unstrapping letters with the other. Outside, a fresh horse waits, sleek, alert, and infinitely unimpressed by your human emotions. It's worth pausing to appreciate that this system wasn't some scrappy workaround. The yam, as it was called, was an official state infrastructure. Riders were given travel documents called gerege, but also seals of legitimacy. In a land with few cities and fewer paved roads, the Mongols still managed to move news faster than many medieval empires burdened with bureaucracy and brick. Historians still debate whether the Mongol relay stations were all uniformly constructed or varied wildly depending on local materials. Some accounts describe stations with proper bunk beds and storerooms. Others, just a fire pit and a roof that leaked less than the sky. As you prepare to head back out, the station master appears, a woman in her 40s with a shaved head and arms like firewood. She doesn't say a word, but gestures for your gerege. You show it. She scans the iron badge, holds it close to the firelight, and then nods.
North Pass, she says, pointing to the mountain trail barely visible through the fogged-up window slits. You nod back. That's how conversations go here, brief and blisteringly practical. The next leg of the journey is colder, higher altitude. Your horse snorts visible breath and shuffles its hooves like it knows what's coming. You pull your cloak tighter and press forward. As the trail climbs, the wind sharpens. The ground shifts underfoot, from muddy soil to frozen gravel to hard-packed snow. The trees thin, replaced by stubborn shrubs and rocks with more personality than you'd prefer.
This is where the yam becomes more than a clever system. It becomes a lifeline. You pass a stack of stones, ovus they're called, small shrines where travelers leave offerings for safe passage. You dismount, circle it clockwise 3 times, and place a smooth pebble on top. You don't believe in step spirits, per se, but you also haven't been struck by lightning yet, so. There's a strange peace in this desolate landscape, the kind that feels ancient, like you're riding through time as much as through space. You imagine other riders years ago trudging along this same path with scrolls strapped to their backs and dreams of a warm bed. One quirky tradition among the couriers, some carried bits of fermented mare's milk called erag tucked in their sleeves. Not for hydration, more like emotional support. It tastes somewhere between yogurt and vinegar, and if you're lucky, it only smells slightly like socks, but it's home. Halfway up the slope, you spot something ahead, a collapsed relay station, perhaps abandoned after a fire. Its charred beams poke out like ribs. You pause just long enough to murmur a small curse on whichever official forgot to resupply this outpost. Historians still argue whether such failures were rare exceptions or distressingly common. Some chronicles paint the yam as a miracle of administration. Others suggest it was constantly 2 goats away from collapse. Either way, you don't have time to dwell. The clouds are thickening and snow is beginning to fall, not in dramatic flurries, but with slow, wet indifference, like the sky got bored and sighed on you. You press on, focused on the small rhythmic sounds of hoofbeats crunching frost. Somewhere up ahead lies the next station, another bowl of soup, another fresh horse, and maybe, just maybe, a blanket that doesn't smell like oiled leather.
By nightfall, the trail levels out. A pale moon emerges through the drifting clouds, casting everything in silver and shadow. You spot the flicker of firelight ahead, barely visible between 2 twisted pine trees. Relief seeps into your shoulders. The yam station looms like a guardian hut, weather-beaten, soot-streaked, but miraculously standing. You dismount with a wince. Your knees crack like old furniture, but you've made it again. Inside, you're greeted by warmth, the soft murmur of another rider dreaming on a pallet, and the comforting stink of damp wool. You hand over your gerege without a word. The station master grunts approval and gestures toward the hearth. You settle in beside it, letting the heat soak through your bones. And in that quiet moment, as the wind howls gently outside and a bowl of questionable stew bubbles nearby, you realize something. This system wasn't built for comfort. It was built for momentum, for trust, and for messages that could cross empires before a candle burned halfway down. The stew tonight is ambiguous. You poke at a floating chunk and wonder if it used to neigh. Still, it's hot, and you're far too tired to be fussy. You scoop a spoonful, chew slowly, and let your eyes trace the shadows dancing along the smoke-blackened rafters. One of the other riders snores softly from under a pile of hides, curled like a ferret in hibernation. You envy him. Your thoughts drift to the gerege, your badge of passage. It's a small, seemingly simple object, often cast from bronze or iron, occasionally inlaid with silver if the courier was of high enough rank. It's warm in your hand now, still faintly radiating heat from the firelight. On it is inscribed the name of the Khan, or whoever currently serves in power, and sometimes a phrase meant to inspire awe in would-be troublemakers. Something like, "He who does not obey shall be guilty of a crime." Historians still argue whether all gerege bore the exact same inscription or if they were tailored to specific missions. Some even believe there were fake ones in circulation, used by ambitious merchants or wandering spies trying to shortcut their way across the steppes. The Mongols did not appreciate forgeries. The punishment? Let's just say the offending party no longer had use for passports of any kind. You tuck the badge away and stretch your legs near the hearth. Someone added more wood. The flames crackle brighter, casting deep orange hues across the station's rough interior. You spot a painted symbol above the door, likely a tamga, a family or tribal mark. You don't recognize it, but it feels oddly comforting, like someone, centuries ago, wanted you to feel not entirely alone. Earlier that day, as you crossed a shallow river, your horse paused midstream, not out of defiance, just momentary confusion. You took the opportunity to rinse your hands in the icy flow, watching the current spin little whirls of sediment around your fingers. There's a clarity to Mongol travel that's hard to find elsewhere. No cities, no tolls, no gossip at ends, just the elements, the occasional bird of prey overhead, and the relentless rhythm of hooves.
You remember the ancient edict behind all of this. Yam service couriers must be treated as royal envoys. That meant if someone stopped you on the road, you had the legal right to commandeer food, a fresh horse, even shelter, within reason. Not that you abused the privilege. You once heard a tale about a courier who asked too much and ended up riding home with a saddle full of bees. Possibly apocryphal. Possibly not. Another bowl of stew is offered, this one fresher. The station master, a man with a long scar across one eyebrow, gives a toothless grin and sits beside you. He doesn't speak your dialect fluently, but you understand each other just fine. He nods toward your saddlebag and raises a questioning brow. You unbuckle the flap and show him the contents. Several wrapped scrolls bound tightly with red string, and a wax-sealed pouch that feels far heavier than it should. He whistles low and offers you a bit of dried cheese in barter. You accept it, not out of hunger, but as a show of mutual trust. Outside, the wind picks up. It whistles through the shutters and makes the fire dance violently for a moment before settling again. The other rider shifts in his sleep. You sit back and close your eyes, not to sleep, but to feel the moment. The air smells like ash and fur, like melted snow and unwashed wool. You've never been more alive or more aware of how much this journey wears away the soft edges of your personality. And still, you ride, for the system demands it. There's an odd little tale you once overheard at another station about a Mongol courier who raced a falcon across 3 valleys just to see who would arrive first. No one remembers who won, but the idea stuck with you. The yam wasn't just fast, it was competitive, almost proudly obsessive about efficiency. It made the Pony Express look like a Sunday picnic. Historians still debate how far an average courier traveled in a single day. Some sources say 200 miles with a fresh horse at each station. Others say that number's exaggerated, likely propaganda meant to make the empire seem even more terrifyingly organized. Either way, the roads weren't smooth. You've ridden across cracked earth, frozen rivers, even sand dunes that seem to stretch forever, swallowing hooves in silence. You take out your map. It's a mess of brushstrokes, ink blotches, and marginalia scribbled by half-literate administrators. Still, it gets you where you need to go, one stop at a time. You trace tomorrow's route with your thumb. 12 more stations until you reach Karakoram. With luck, you'll be there in 4 days. Without luck, well, you know where the wolves are. Your eyelids start to drift. The fire lulls you into a soft daze. The station master hums a tune you don't recognize, rhythmic and low. The wind sings back up. And still, the yam hums along with you. Morning arrives not with a sunrise, but with a shift in the cold. You feel it before your eyes even open.
The way the chill settles deeper into your bones, like the fire's long since surrendered. When you finally do blink awake, it's to the gray half-light of a Mongol dawn. Everything is hushed. Even the birds haven't quite decided if it's worth singing yet. Your limbs are stiff, but the promise of momentum gets you up. The saddle calls. You splash your face with icy water from a nearby trough and chew on a strip of salted meat that may or may not have been from the same animal you ate in the stew last night. Travel, you remind yourself, isn't gourmet. The gerege is the first thing you check. Still there, still whole, still your license to ride. Today's route winds through the foothills, broad shoulders of earth with patches of snow clinging stubbornly in shadowed gullies. It's not exactly treacherous, but if you slip here, you'll tumble for days. The horse is sure-footed though. You give it a name in your head, Pebble, because it kicks them like it's angry at the ground. It makes you chuckle, and that helps keep the cold out for a little while longer. As you ride, you reflect on how the Yam system worked so impressively for such a vast empire. Unlike medieval Europe, where the roads were more fantasy than fact, and most messages traveled at the pace of a gossiping monk, the Mongols had built a veritable web across the known world. Their network stretched from Korea to the Black Sea, from the Siberian forests down into the silk-lined cities of China. The key? Simplicity and standardization. Each station, called an ortu, was roughly 25 to 30 miles apart, spaced just close enough to swap out horses while keeping speed consistent. Riders didn't carry much: a light satchel, the all-important gerege, and perhaps a small dagger. Everything else was supplied along the way. Historians still argue whether this efficiency was born of deliberate strategy or just the natural result of Mongol pragmatism. After all, when your empire is too large to yell across, you'd better find a quieter way to communicate. Like, say, a semi-military network of express riders, empowered to bypass all borders. At one or too many points along the trail, the markers grow faint: weathered signs carved into stone, or bundles of feathers tied to a post. You navigate more by instinct than map, the way a migratory bird might. The path curves gently up and around a hill, revealing a narrow pass dusted with frost. The wind howls here, but you're used to that now. The silence underneath is more telling.
Just ahead, a small structure rises from the earth. Low stone walls, sloped wooden roof, smoke curling from a makeshift chimney. Another ort. You've made it, again. You dismount, stretch your back until it pops audibly, and lead Pebble to the modest hitching post. Inside, the station is warmer than expected. A fire burns low in the center pit, and two other riders are finishing a meal of boiled barley and what might be goat's milk. They glance up, nod respectfully, then return to their food. You nod back. In this world, that's practically a group hug. You settle in, and before long, a station master, a woman this time, broad-shouldered and squinting as if she's always judging weather, brings you a new horse. No questions asked, just duty and speed. This new horse is leaner than Pebble, but you can already tell it's faster. You pet its mane gently. A fresh burst of distance now sits beneath you. You take a moment before setting out again to examine a scroll in your satchel. The seal is unbroken, naturally, but the weight of the thing, literal and symbolic, sits heavy in your hands. Somewhere down the line, a provincial governor will open this, squint at its elegant curves of ink, and probably issue a grain tax adjustment. You, meanwhile, are out here ice skating across a continent with numb fingers and stories only birds would believe. Did you know the Yam network even had early forms of accountability? Every courier had to record their arrival and departure at each station. If someone went missing, the system could track where they were last seen. Primitive, yes, but in the 13th century, that counted as GPS with attitude. The Mongols took lost messages very seriously. Paper mattered.
Secrets mattered more. Historians debate whether the Mongols intentionally used the yam for espionage. It certainly would have been easy, sending coded notes between agents under the guise of logistics. But there's little surviving proof, mostly because, if they did, they were too good at it to leave records behind. You adjust your coat, sip the barley drink you were handed, bland, thick, nourishing, and set off again. The road unwinds before you like a scroll being opened. You imagine the entire system as one vast living script. Your horse, the quill, the landscape, the parchment, your journey, a line being inked in real time. By mid-afternoon, the sun fights its way through the clouds, casting long slats of light across the hills. You pass a herd of wild sheep who barely look up from their grazing. One of them sneezes, and you laugh out loud. No one hears it but the wind. And so, you ride on.
By now, your body has adjusted to the rhythm of long-distance riding. The gentle sway of the saddle, the quiet huff of the horse beneath you, the soft creak of leather straps, all of it becomes a sort of lullaby for the senses. You drift not to sleep, but into that half-dreaming place where time stretches, folds, and eventually forgets it's supposed to pass. The road ahead dips into a shallow valley, and you follow it like water would. Sparse trees dot the slope, their bare branches scratching the cold sky like quill pens mid-thought. A hawk circles above, perhaps wondering if you're edible, then moves on. Wise bird. The Yam network, you realize, wasn't just about transportation. It was a symbol of Mongol order in an otherwise chaotic world. In a time when most kingdoms were held together with superstitions and duct tape, or, leather bindings, the Mongols had managed to lay down a literal lifeline of communication. And not just for military matters. Civil administrators used the Yam to send census data. Merchants relied on it for trade permits. Even religious leaders, yes, even rival religions under Mongol rule, benefited from the speed and safety of the route. It was oddly egalitarian for an empire best known for turning cities into kindling. The gerege you carry, shaped from metal or carved wood, isn't just a fancy ID. It's practically a golden ticket. The bearer of a gerege could requisition fresh horses, food, shelter, even a guide at any stop. You don't abuse the privilege, but let's be honest, it's nice not to sleep under a bush every night. Some scholars still argue whether the gerege system was truly universal or mainly reserved for elite couriers and officials. There are records of common traders receiving limited access to the network, but whether that was policy or generous station masters is still debated. Either way, the gerege is your passport, hall pass, and fast-track bracelet, all rolled into one. You come to another or two, this one more fortified, timber walls, a low gate, and two men playing dice in the doorway. They barely glance up until you flash the gerege. Then they stand, not because they like you, but because the gerege demands it.
Inside, the place smells of sweat, boiled onions, and damp wool. You're handed a bowl of soup and a hunk of bread. No one asks your name. No one needs to. You're just the next rider. That's enough. Across from you, an older courier with a scar down one cheek nods slowly as he eats. His horse waits patiently outside, snorting steam into the cold air. You exchange a few words about road conditions, mudslide back near the river, wolves spotted 2 nights ago, and that's the full extent of your socializing. The truth is, Yam couriers rarely traveled in groups. Speed demanded solitude. You begin to appreciate the quiet, the way it wraps around you like an extra layer of clothing. There's something peaceful about being just one dot in a system so much bigger than you.
Before you leave, you inspect your next mount. She's a sturdy mare with intelligent eyes and a suspiciously enthusiastic tail. You pat her side, whisper something encouraging, and climb on. Your route now curves eastward toward a lowland dotted with winter villages. Smoke rises from chimneys in lazy spirals, and you pass farmers using crude sleds to haul bundles of firewood. A child waves. You wave back. He grins like he's met a celebrity. One of the more overlooked elements of the Yam system was its role in local economies. Each ort needed food, horses, fuel, staff. That meant employment, commerce, a reason for people to settle, even in places no one would voluntarily choose to live. Some historians believe the Yam actually helped stabilize vast swaths of otherwise lawless territory. When people had something to lose, jobs, safety, a warm bed, they tended to cooperate, or at least not stab each other over root vegetables. You pass a marker stone, half buried in frost, engraved with curling script. It's probably a direction indicator, though it could just as easily be a grave. Mongol stones didn't always bother to explain themselves. There's a moment when the wind dies and the snow begins to fall. Light, quiet, indifferent, flakes drifting like ash. It's beautiful in that haunting way snow always is. You breathe in through your nose. Cold, clean, timeless.
Another hour of riding and you spot a herder with a cluster of yaks. He raises one gloved hand and offers you a drink from a goatskin pouch. You sip it. It tastes like regret and fermented socks. You smile anyway. Hospitality matters more than flavor. Back on the road, your thoughts drift to the sheer scale of what the Mongols achieved. In less than a century, they connected more of the world than the Roman Empire ever dreamed. And they did it with paper, ponies, and postal logic. The sun dips lower, casting amber light across the landscape. Your shadow stretches out ahead of you, tall and thin like a stretched out rumor. You feel proud in a quiet way, not for any one deed, but for being part of something so precise, so bizarrely elegant, in a world often held together by little more than spit and superstition. The next or two comes into view, smoke curling up like a flag of welcome. You tighten your grip on the reins, and the mare breaks into a trot. Another stretch behind you. Another day drawn neatly into the great parchment of empire. And still, the road ahead waits. Your next stretch takes you across a wide and wind-blasted plateau where the sky seems to press down just a little harder. The horizon here is a blur between earth and air. No trees, no hills, just the kind of emptiness that humbles you and makes you wish, mildly, for a snack. Your mare's hooves thud rhythmically on the hardened ground, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you begin counting them like sheep. Hey, it works. This part of the Yam route was one of the more exposed links in the network. On maps, those beautiful scrolls inked in black and red, it looked like a simple line between stations. But on horseback, it was a frozen expanse where wind tried to chew your ears off and your water skin slowly turned into a gourd-shaped icicle. You spot a distant shimmer, another traveler. As they approach, you see the telltale gleam of metal hanging from their neck. A fellow courier. You nod, they nod, and without a word, you both continue past each other. There's something oddly comforting in that shared silence, like you're both extras in the same cosmic play, hitting your marks exactly. The Mongol postal system wasn't just fast, it was regulated down to the detail-loving bone. The distances between Ortu stations were calculated so that each horse could ride at peak speed without dropping dead from exhaustion. A fresh mount awaited at every stop, trained and prepped. You didn't name them, of course. That would be dangerous. Emotionally, not logistically. At one point, your mare slows, nostrils flaring. You listen. There, barely audible over the wind, is the baying of wolves. You don't panic. They're far off, probably just having a nightly choir rehearsal. Still, you keep one hand near the small knife tucked into your belt, not because it'll help, just because it feels better that way.
Interestingly, the Yam system sometimes included armed guards at riskier posts. The term riskier here covered everything from bandits to snow leopards to over-enthusiastic tax collectors. There's an old record of one Urtu being attacked by wild boars. Scholars still argue whether that was metaphorical or just an incredibly unlucky Tuesday. You reach the edge of the plateau and begin descending toward a narrow valley. The path turns rocky, the kind that rattles your teeth and makes your spine hum like a tuning fork. But the view? The view is something else. Down below, nestled beside a winding river, lies the next Urtu. Smoke rises from its chimney and warm yellow light leaks from its tiny windows. It's a painting of coziness, framed by sheer survival. You feel like a character walking into a bedtime story with frostbite. Inside, the host, a man with a magnificent mustache and zero tolerance for nonsense, offers you fermented mare's milk and a place by the fire. You accept the latter. The former, you pretend to sip. It tastes like yogurt had a midlife crisis. As you warm your hands, he asks where you've come from. You answer. He nods like you just told him the weather. Then he offers something rarer than warmth or food: gossip. A caravan passed through earlier, he says. Silk traders from the south, 2 weeks behind schedule thanks to a blizzard and an extremely stubborn camel. They were carrying a sealed scroll meant for a Persian merchant. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Mongol routes didn't just link their own empire, they connected to a much wider world. That's what made the Yam so revolutionary. Unlike most medieval postal systems, which were little more than glorified relay races for royalty, the Mongol version served practical commerce and even diplomacy. Some historians argue it laid the foundation for international mail, centuries before Europeans thought of licking stamps. When you finally leave the fire, your bones protest loudly. But duty calls. You're part of a system that doesn't slow down, even when your joints do. Outside, the stars blaze in the clear night sky. So many, it feels almost rude. You mount your next horse, a shaggy creature that looks like he's eaten better than you this week. You envy him, slightly. As you ride, your breath curls in clouds, and the moon lights your way like an indifferent guide. You think about the sheer scale again, how thousands of couriers like you crisscrossed the empire every day, each one a link in this massive, humming chain of paper and hoofbeats. One curious detail: some gerege were said to carry not just symbols of authority, but specific blessings, tiny engravings meant to protect the bearer from illness or betrayal. Were they effective? Historians still argue whether these were state-sanctioned charms or just fancy accessories. You choose to believe yours works. Why not? It's been a decent day. The road winds on, and the only sound now is your horse's steady gait and the occasional soft jingle of tack. No music, no headlights, just you and the stars, held together by ancient logistics.
and the promise of a warm or two somewhere ahead.
You reach a bend in the trail where the river runs close beside the road, its icy surface chattering softly under the press of winter. A thin bridge, just a few planks lashed with leather, crosses it, and you pause. The mare snorts. She's not thrilled about it either. But across that bridge is the next segment of your journey, and you're a yam courier now. Yam couriers do not detour for inconvenient rivers. The Mongol postal system didn't tolerate delays unless the delay was death, and even then, it preferred death to be brief and courteous. You guide the horse carefully across, every step echoing like a drum roll for a performance neither of you rehearsed. The boards creak, but hold. On the far side, the terrain changes again, more forested now, with scattered trees and long shadows cast by the moon. It's beautiful in a bleak, hope-you-like-wolves sort of way. This part of the route was notorious for being eerily quiet. Some couriers reported hearing flutes playing in the distance, though no musicians were ever found. Historians still argue whether this was some psychological effect of long-distance riding or evidence of supernatural folklore woven into the journey. You personally think the flutes were probably just wind and a lot of sleep deprivation, but you'd still rather not find out firsthand. Along the path, you come across an abandoned ger, a Mongolian yurt. Its felt walls have caved slightly, and the embroidered flaps sag sadly. Inside, you find a burned-out hearth and the remains of a dried-up stew. No one's home, but there's something oddly comforting about it. Like you're not the first to pass this way, like others came through and warmed themselves too. You don't linger. The courier's creed: never stop longer than your shadow. Back on the trail, the wind picks up. Your scarf flaps like a sail, and you hunch lower. The cold feels personal now, like it knows your middle name and is using it. And yet, remarkably, letters still get delivered.
The system's efficiency hinged on the gerege, of course, that elegant metal tablet that overruled fear, hunger, and bureaucracy. With it, you could demand fresh horses, food, shelter, and sometimes even a place in a noble's tent. One European traveler called it a passport kissed by thunder. Bit dramatic, but not far off. Some of the gerege were rumored to include markings in multiple scripts: Mongolian, Chinese, Arabic, and even Uyghur. This was both practical and deeply symbolic, proof that the Mongol Empire didn't just conquer land, it united it under the most unexpected authority: paperwork. You stop at a wooden signpost carved in ornate Tangut script, pointing three ways: west, north, and definitely don't go this way. You're tempted, but no. Your route is due north, toward the next Ortu, which sits on a rise beyond the tree line. You spur the mare gently, and she lurches into a trot, as if just remembering she has somewhere better to be. The next station appears like a lighthouse in the dark, one torch lit above the door, casting long golden spears of light across the snow. You dismount, your knees complaining like an aging choir, and hand off your gerege. The station master, a young woman with calloused hands and a face like a carved walnut, inspects it without blinking. Then she nods, whistles, and someone inside brings you hot broth in a wooden cup. You thank her and ask about the road ahead. She replies that it's clear. Well, except for the ghosts, but they're mostly polite this time of year. You smile, unsure if she's joking. She doesn't clarify. In the corner of the Ortu, a giant map hangs like a tapestry. You study it as you sip your broth, tracing routes across the empire like a child following a finger maze. Red lines dart from Karakorum to Kiev, from Samarkand to Seoul. You realize that every dot on this map represents another career like you, galloping through wind or heat, carrying words that could tip the balance of power, or just remind someone to pay their taxes. One quirky side note: Genghis Khan himself reportedly insisted
that even poetry could be delivered via yam if it was properly sealed and registered. A courier once traveled nearly 800 miles just to deliver a love poem from one noble to another. Scholars still argue whether this poem was any good or just the 13th century equivalent of a very long "you up" message. As you prepare to rest, you scratch behind your ear absently and glance around. There are symbols etched into the Ortu's walls, protection runes, they say, but no one ever confirms who carved them or when. They're just always there. You lay back on a wool-stuffed mat and let your breath slow. The flicker of the torch still dances faintly on the ceiling above you, and you listen to the low hum of wind against the wooden walls. You're warm, you're dry. Your letter is still safely tucked under your belt. Tomorrow you'll ride again. Tonight, you rest like a ghost whispering through history, wrapped in layers of fur and purpose.
You stir at first light, though light might be generous. It's more a smudge of silver creeping beneath the doorframe. The fire in the hearth has long since died, leaving only a faint warmth in the stones. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, and stretched just enough to remember you're still made of meat and not parchment. The station keeper from the night before offers a nod and a crust of bread. You thank her with a grunt and pack up. No one here expects chatter. Couriers are like ghosts, seen, sometimes heard, but never lingering. Outdoors, a dusting of new snow has covered your tracks. Clean slate, the land seems to say. You mount your new horse, this one a spirited bay with an attitude that says, "Yes, I bite," and turn her toward the next leg of the yam. The road narrows again, cutting through a low valley between rolling hills. You ride past frozen streams, abandoned charcoal kilns, and one ominous pile of stones that might be a grave or might just be a very neat accident. Scholars still argue whether Mongol road markers sometimes doubled as burial sites for fallen messengers, or if that's just a romantic exaggeration. As the sun finally makes a half-hearted appearance, you pull your coat tighter. The wind here doesn't howl, it lectures in long, drawn-out syllables that carry through your bones. You try humming to keep yourself distracted, but stop when you catch the horse giving you a judgmental ear flick. Fair. A few miles in, you spot another gerege bearing courier approaching from the opposite direction. You both slow instinctively and exchange nods. Nothing more. That's the whole greeting. But in that flicker of eye contact, there's a shared understanding. Same frostbitten toes, same paper-stuffed destiny. You are ink deliverers on horseback, and no storm, wolf, or bureaucratic nightmare can stop you. In truth, the Mongol system didn't just invent the passport. It created a sprawling web of logistical infrastructure so efficient that it baffled European observers for centuries. Venetian traveler Marco Polo famously remarked that the speed of messages under the Khan made European kingdoms look like drunken snails. Okay, maybe he didn't exactly say that, but you get the point. The gerege's authority came from Genghis Khan himself, who, contrary to popular image, was not just a warlord, but a surprisingly bureaucratic one. He believed in standardizing things, weights, laws, and above all, authority. The gerege was an extension of his will, small enough to carry, heavy enough to matter. Each gerege bore the imperial seal and often included magical or spiritual engravings. Some were thought to be blessed by shamans to ensure the bearer's protection, although whether that meant divine protection or just social compliance is up for debate. As you ride, you pass the ruins of an older Ortu, now mostly collapsed into the earth. Crows hop between the stones, looking self-important. You pause for a sip of water, then press on. In this part of the empire, you're closer to the silk routes, and the landscape shows it. Fragments of old trade, an
overturned ceramic jar, what might be the rim of a Chinese coin half buried in ice. This stretch is known as the Whispering Road, not because people whisper here, but because the trees do. Thin birch and pine line the path, and when the wind moves through them just right, it sounds like voices, muffled, endless, just at the edge of understanding. Most couriers learn to ignore it, or pretend to. Eventually, you reach another marker, this one etched not in Mongolian script, but in Persian. It's one of the many small signs that the Mongol Empire was a patchwork quilt of cultures and languages, sewn together by hoofbeats and treaties. Genghis Khan didn't just conquer cities, he recruited their best administrators, scribes, and engineers. The result? An empire that ran terrifyingly well. At this station, you trade again, horse for horse, a fresh pot of milk tea, and a brief nodding conversation with a grumpy elder who insists your saddle's too tight. You check it. He's right. You thank him. He grunts. One curious fact, some scholars believe the yam system eventually inspired early versions of postal networks in both the Ottoman Empire and Europe. While they lacked Mongol flair and probably the dramatic horse switching, they borrowed the bones of it. The idea that authority could be transferred via object, that mobility could be licensed, and that news could beat armies to the battlefield. As you ride again, you think about how odd it is that the gerege, this plain metal tag, has the power to reshape your entire experience of the empire. Without it, you'd be just another traveler, freezing on the roadside. With it, you're royalty light, passing freely across borders that would usually involve days of pleading and bribery. The day wanes, and the shadows grow long. Your new horse has a better attitude, less "I bite," more "I tolerate." The stars begin to poke through the dusk, and the sky turns a washed indigo. You exhale through your scarf, your breath curling like a dragon's sigh. Soon you'll reach another station, another hearth, another nod. But for now, the road stretches ahead like an ink line on a parchment map, thin, winding, and impossibly important.
By now, your saddle has molded to the shape of your hips, or perhaps your hips have surrendered to the saddle. Either way, the bounce and sway no longer surprise you. It's like you and the horse have come to an unspoken truce. You'll stop singing off key if she stops trying to throw you into a snowbank. The moon has risen, pale and wide as a coin, casting a milk glow over the plains. You ride under its light now, the world reduced to silhouettes and breath clouds. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls, not menacingly, more like it's checking in. You nod politely in reply. That's just how things are out here. The yam system, efficient as it was, wasn't without its share of improvisation. In certain areas where no proper ortu had been built yet, couriers relied on local herders or nomadic families for shelter. Some offered fermented mare's milk, others offered just a cold patch of earth and a warning about the bears. There's no Yelp review system for Mongol road hospitality, just word of mouth and how many teeth you still had in the morning. You approach one such improvised post now, a modest yurt, its felt walls glowing faintly from within, sits on a low hill. Smoke curls from the vent, and a shaggy dog, half wolf, half question mark, stares at you as you dismount. You offer a gentle "say nu" in greeting, and the family inside welcomes you in with the warmth only strangers in the cold can muster. They feed you stew thick with root vegetables and mystery meat. It's delicious. You don't ask. The woman stokes the fire while the grandfather nods at your gerege. He doesn't need to read it. He knows what it means. He tells you, slowly and without ceremony, how once he saw a man carry such a pass straight through the mountains to the court of the Khan himself, stopping only to change horses and drink tea. He says it like one might speak of a bird's migration or a comet, remarkable but inevitable. In the Mongol world, movement wasn't just a convenience, it was identity. Being still meant something had gone wrong. Whether you were a herder, a soldier, or a courier like yourself, life was measured not in seasons, but in distance. The Yam system turned that nomadic instinct into a functioning empire.
And here's the quirky bit. The Mongols didn't invent roads in the traditional sense. They used the land as it was, shaping it only slightly to their needs. Their postal roads were less cobbled highways and more invisible arteries, pulsing across grassland, desert, and forest. Horses remembered the paths. So did birds. You, meanwhile, rely on a hand-drawn map and the vague hope that the stars haven't changed since last night. Outside, you hear the creak of your horse shifting in the wind. Inside, the fire pops softly, and the yurt feels like a pocket of warmth in an indifferent world. You finish your tea. It tastes faintly of mint and iron. As you settle into the corner with your blanket, the grandfather mentions, offhand like recounting what he had for lunch, that some believed the gerege itself could bring misfortune if handled carelessly. There were tales, he says, of messengers who lost them and were cursed to wander forever, never arriving. Historians still argue whether these were actual warnings or just bedtime stories designed to make young riders double-check their saddlebags. You drift off for a bit, lulled by firelight and the low rumble of voices in a language older than your tongue. When you wake again, it's still dark, but colder. The stars seem closer now, as if leaning in to inspect you. You nod your thanks, remount, and ride once more. By now, your route is drawing near to a larger settlement, one of the Empire's many relay cities where major routes converged. These hubs were where documents changed hands, fresh supplies were distributed, and occasionally a courier could enjoy the rare luxury of a hot bath. You try not to get your hopes up. As you ride, you reflect on how truly strange and remarkable the gerege system was. It wasn't simply about letting someone pass through checkpoints. It granted temporary access to the entire machine of empire. Resources, protection, housing, even labor. A single metal tablet could summon a spare horse or a bowl of soup 1,000 miles from home. And while modern passports contain barcodes and biometric chips, your gerege is far simpler, yet in a way, more powerful. There are no scans or holograms, just a shared understanding, a cultural contract sealed not by law, but by legacy. The wind picks up again, sending flurries of snow into your hood. You lower your head, and the horse trudges forward with determination that suggests she too wouldn't mind that hot bath. Finally, up ahead, torchlights shimmer, small, flickering dots against the curtain of night. The city's outer posts. You've made it.
The city gates rise before you, wooden beams bound in iron, flanked by weather-worn watchtowers. There's no dramatic fanfare, no trumpets blaring or flags waving, just two guards with frost in their beards and curiosity in their eyes as you ride up through the starlit hush. You hand one the gerege, and he turns it over in his mittened fingers. Even in the torchlight, the engraved script glints gold. After a pause that's more theatrical than necessary, he nods once and steps aside. Inside, the city isn't bustling, it's snoozing. You've arrived during the deepest watch of night, when even the stray dogs have stopped pretending to be useful. The streets are dusted with snow, Oil lanterns flicker in windows. Somewhere a rooster, very confused, gives a half-hearted crow. You pass vendors' stalls, all covered now with thick cloths. There's a butcher's hook still swinging slightly from the last gust of wind. A line of carts stands abandoned in the square, wheels frozen to the ground. The silence is so complete you can hear your horse's breath like a kettle boiling. Eventually, you reach the Yam station. It's easy to spot, larger than most houses, with a distinct wooden plaque carved in both classical Mongolian and Chinese. Inside, a single lamp burns. A clerk, bleary-eyed and wrapped in more layers than a nesting doll, peers up from his furs as you step in. He doesn't ask your name, just takes the tablet, logs your arrival in a thick leather-bound ledger, and gestures toward a side room with straw mats and a boiling kettle. You exhale, stretch, and peel off your gloves. The heat hits you like a soft slap. You've made it, for now. This station, like many others, was more than a post office. It was a little slice of imperial organization, placed squarely in the wilderness. Historians often compare it to a modern logistics hub, but honestly, it's closer to a teleportation checkpoint from some fantasy game. You arrive in the dark, hand over a token, and emerge hours later with a new mission, new direction, and slightly better boots. You sit beside the kettle, sipping barley tea that tastes faintly of smoke and ash. The clerk mutters to himself as he organizes parchments, sorting them by route and urgency. You wonder if he's ever traveled. Most Yam clerks didn't. They lived their entire lives watching others come and go. Some even started keeping journals about the stories riders brought in, although historians still argue whether these were factual logs or creative fiction disguised as admin work. One such account, from a clerk named Bolod in Karakoram, includes an entire section on unusual travelers. Among them, a merchant who insisted his goat could speak Persian, a shaman who claimed the gerege gave her visions, and a man who tried to exchange a stolen gerege for 3 cabbages and a wife. None of them made it far, for the system, while oddly trusting, still had teeth. Yes, lose your gerege, and you'd better have a convincing story or very fast legs. You rise, stretch again, and check your satchel. It still holds the message, a scroll sealed with wax and stamped with a falcon's crest. Its contents? Unknown to you. The Yam courier's job wasn't to pry, only to deliver. That said, a gentle shake once revealed something inside that rattled like coins or teeth. You didn't shake it again. As dawn creeps in, the city begins to stir. Shopkeepers emerge to shovel snow. The smell of frying dough wafts in through a crack in the shutter. Somewhere, a smith bangs a lazy rhythm on iron. It's the soft percussion of civilization rebooting. You step outside, where your next horse, already saddled and somehow looking more annoyed than the last, is waiting. You nod at the clerk, who nods back with the quiet resignation of someone who knows your bed is now his again. Back on the trail, the terrain shifts. The road heads south now, into warmer air and gentler valleys. Forests replace steppe. Birds call from trees instead of circling above. You almost forget you're still in Mongol territory, until you pass a boundary marker carved with Genghis Khan's imperial seal. The system stretches farther than most empires ever dreamed. It links icy plains to desert caravans, war councils to love letters. In a world built on distance and distrust, the gerege made connection possible. You pass a pair of riders going the opposite direction. They nod in silent solidarity. You don't stop. There's a rhythm to it now. Ride, rest, hand off, repeat. The Yam turns men into machines, but you don't mind. Not when the world itself opens like a scroll before you. Somewhere up ahead, your route will end. You'll deliver the message, turn in the gerege, and perhaps finally get that bath. Or maybe not. But until then, you ride.
You shift in the saddle, feeling the ache of hours spent bouncing over uneven terrain. Your legs are stiff, your back is sore, and your right boot has developed a suspiciously squelchy texture, definitely not waterproof. But none of that matters as you crest a small hill and catch your first glimpse of the Yam station nestled in the valley below, smoke curling gently from its roof. This one's larger than most, a regional hub. It even has a small stable attached to the side, painted with faded red pigment and a crude horse symbol that looks vaguely like it was drawn by someone mid-sneeze. But it does the job. You swing down from your horse, who grunts with unmistakable relief, and hand the reins to a boy no older than 12, already bustling around with a bucket of feed. Inside, the station hums with a kind of orderly chaos. Riders rest on floor mats, guards sip fermented mare's milk from wooden cups, and a stern-looking woman jots notes in a ledger the size of a brick. You present your gerege with a practiced hand. She scans it, gives you a look that says you better not have tracked mud on my floor, and gestures toward a low table set with steaming dumplings. It's hard to imagine that just a few decades ago, this entire network didn't exist. Back then, messengers stumbled across deserts, bribed their way through city gates, and often vanished into forests never to return. But now, thanks to one man's vision, well, one man and a legion of terrified scribes, you can travel from the Caspian Sea to Korea without once explaining why your message smells like yak. You bite into a dumpling, which tastes vaguely of mutton and mystery. Around you, conversations bubble in Persian, Mongolian, Uyghur, and Chinese. Riders compare notes on road conditions, gossip about the Khan's latest decree, and argue about the best way to keep warm without lighting your boots on fire. A scroll is handed off with reverence. A falcon, tethered near the window, watches the exchange with a judgmental glare. Someone jokes that the birds probably memorized every route by now. Scholars today still argue whether the Yam was truly a passport system in the modern sense. Some claim it was simply a glorified courier network. Others point out that the gerege wasn't just a travel permit. It carried the weight of the empire itself. Losing it could be grounds for punishment. Forging one? That was a one-way ticket to being gently unalived. Interestingly, a few preserved tablets have been found with false engravings, clumsy attempts to mimic the imperial seal. One in particular, discovered near the Volga River, is so poorly etched that it appears to say, "Fish milk very fast," which is either code or the result of someone trying to bribe a blacksmith with soup.
Back at the station, the evening wears on. Riders leave, new ones arrive, horses are rubbed down and resaddled. You linger a bit longer than usual, savoring the warmth and relative safety. You've earned it. Then, with the same inevitability that plagues alarm clocks and tax deadlines, it's time to move on. You retrieve your updated route instructions, handwritten in elegant brush script and sealed with blue wax. The clerk hands them over with the look of someone passing a cursed object. You thank her, bow slightly, and return to your freshly brushed steed, who looks at you with the weary eyes of a horse who's seen things. The road east winds into a pine forest where the snow has melted into thick slush. Crows circle overhead, occasionally letting out screeches that sound suspiciously like insults. A fox darts across your path and vanishes like a magician's assistant. You push onward, past a shrine made of stacked stones, past a half-frozen creek that burbles like it's trying to gossip. Here, the silence feels sacred. Even the birds are cautious, chirping only when absolutely necessary. You pass an old man hauling firewood in a cart shaped like a pig. He nods at you, then continues on without a word. You'll remember him later, not for what he said, but for the way he seemed to exist entirely on his own terms. Night falls again. You reach the next station, and the process repeats. Like clockwork, like muscle memory, like breathing. It's hard to say when exactly the Yam system became your entire life. You used to have a village, a mother who braided your hair too tightly, a dog with 3 legs and no shame. But now you're a line on a map, a dot inching toward its destination. Still, you don't resent it. You've seen more of the world than most emperors. You've slept under stars that no one else remembers. You've crossed rivers so wide they seemed like the edge of the world. And everywhere you've gone, the gerege has opened doors. That little silver tablet, it's not just stamped metal, it's proof that you belong somewhere, even if that somewhere changes every morning.
You wake to the soft crackle of hooves on frost-bitten grass. Morning has arrived with its usual lack of ceremony. No trumpets, no parade, just a fog-thick dawn and the muffled groan of your joints protesting movement. The fire from last night is a pile of sullen coals, and your blanket smells faintly of horse. Classic Yam luxury. Still half asleep, you roll up your mat and glance at the familiar gleam of your gerege tucked safely into your satchel. It catches the dim light like it's winking at you. Still there, still valid, still your best chance at not being chased off someone's land with a rake. You mount your horse, who has the same enthusiasm for early starts as a hungover rooster, and begin your ride toward a district capital. Unlike the way stations, these larger outposts are almost miniature cities, part garrison, part market, part administrative tangle. As you draw closer, the roads widen. You pass traders with carts full of furs, bundles of medicinal herbs tied with reeds, a very confused goose lashed to a pole, and one man hawking what he claims are healing rocks, but which look suspiciously like ordinary river pebbles. You don't buy one. You've already got enough things in your bag with mysterious properties. Arriving at the city gates, you're stopped by a guard in a creased hat and a mustache that suggests either extreme wisdom or a total disregard for mirrors. You hand over your gerege. He squints at it, tilts it, bites it. Why do they always bite it? Then waves you through with a grunt. Inside, the air smells of smoke, dried fish, and ambition. Everything feels slightly hurried. Couriers dash across courtyards with scrolls tucked under their arms. Officials argue about grain taxes. A falconer trains his bird to deliver messages tied to its leg, which is both brilliant and slightly terrifying. You're here to restock, update your route, and most importantly, visit the Yam archive. Yes, they have archives, dozens of them in fact. While the empire stretched across nearly 2/3 of Eurasia, its administrators were obsessive about record keeping. Every gerege had to be logged, every route documented, every lost courier noted with the morbid phrase, delayed indefinitely, which is bureaucratic code for, we've given up. Inside the archive room, rows of pigeonhole shelves hold wax tablets, bark-bound ledgers, and the occasional bit of carved bone used in remote regions. A clerk with ink-stained fingers ushers you to a bench and sets down a record book thick enough to double as a murder weapon. You flip through pages detailing who came through this station, when they left, what they carried, and curiously, the weather. Apparently, someone here had strong opinions about cloud shapes. You find your own entry, a kind of breadcrumb trail across the empire. It's oddly comforting.
Historians debate just how sophisticated the Yam's record-keeping truly was. Some say it rivaled anything the Romans managed. Others suggest the whole system was barely held together by string, stubbornness, and the occasional bribe of fermented yak butter. Either way, the fact that you can track your last 6 routes is impressive enough, especially when you still can't remember your childhood best friend's birthday. You copy your next assignment onto a fresh scroll, seal it, and head out. Before leaving the city, you make time for a proper bath. It's a rare luxury on the road, and one you won't pass up. The bathhouse is steaming and loud, filled with travelers swapping stories and scrubbing off weeks of road dust. Someone's singing an old war ballad out of tune, and you find yourself humming along. Refreshed and slightly pruny, you swing back into the saddle. Your new route leads toward a mountainous pass known for its sharp winds and sharper goats. The sky is already bruising with afternoon clouds. It'll be a long ride, but not your longest. And compared to riding through sandstorms or across frozen rivers, this feels almost cozy. As you ride, you reflect on the unintended legacy of the Yam system. It wasn't just a courier service, it was a kind of soft power. With every message delivered, every traveler aided, every route kept clear, the Mongol Empire projected an image of order. Sure, they were terrifying warriors, but they were also punctual. More than that, the system connected people. A scholar in Samarkand could send questions to a monk in Beijing and receive answers within weeks. A merchant in Tabriz could request silk samples from Yunnan. Diplomats, spies, philosophers, lovers, they all traveled these same roads, following the ghost tracks of hooves before them. Even long after the Mongol Empire fractured, the idea of a passport lingered. Chinese dynasties adapted the concept, European traders marveled at its efficiency, and somewhere along the way, the gerege evolved. From a silver tablet to the paper documents we now flash at airport counters, while silently begging not to be asked about the mysterious tube of lotion in our bags. You descend into a wide valley as dusk creeps up again. The clouds above break for just a moment, letting golden light spill across the landscape like spilled ink on parchment. In the distance, smoke trails mark yet another station. It never ends, this road, but you're okay with that.
By the time you reach the next station, the stars have already begun to scatter across the sky like spilled millet. The air is crisp, bordering on cruel, and the wind brings with it the dry crackle of winter. Another night, another way station. But this one feels quieter, more contemplative. Maybe it's the thin mountain air, or maybe it's just the fatigue settling in your bones like a second layer of clothing. You slide off your horse, who seems just as eager for rest as you are, and lead it to the hitching post beside the flickering lanterns. A stable boy, maybe 12 years old and built mostly of elbows, emerges to help, his hands already stained with hay and soot. You hand over a small pouch of dried meat and a half joke about being gentle with your steed. He doesn't laugh, but he nods solemnly. That's about as much as you'll get at this altitude. Inside the station, warmth licks your face before the door even closes behind you. There's a central hearth, and around it, a few other couriers and travelers gathered, their faces glowing with the amber hue of firelight. You recognize none of them, and yet, in a way, you know all of them. Same saddle sores, same soot-lined fingernails, same knowledge of 100 paths that most people will never walk. You claim a spot near the fire, pulling your blanket tight around your shoulders and stretching your legs. No one speaks for a while. There's an unspoken rule. The first hour is for silence. Let the fire talk first. Let the wind forget your name before you remind the world you're still out here. Eventually, a grizzled older man begins humming what might be a lullaby, or might just be a wheeze with rhythm. Either way, it makes the room feel smaller, in a good way. Someone else, an aristocrat by the look of her boots, starts boiling tea in a battered bronze pot. You offer your last pinch of dried plum for the pot, and she nods, understanding the transaction isn't about value, it's about ritual. As you sip the too-hot tea, you glance again at your gerege, now resting beside your blanket. The silver has dulled a bit over the months, but it still carries that air of quiet authority. It's strange, really, how this one object has carried you across forests, deserts, ice fields, and cities. It's been waved through blockades, blessed by shamans, admired by children, and ignored by donkeys.
And despite what modern passport offices might tell you,
It worked. The Mongol gerege was more than just a travel pass. It was a promise. A promise that no matter where you wandered in this vast, stitched-together empire, you were part of something greater, that someone had fought this route through, that someone wanted you to arrive safely. Historians still argue whether the Mongol passport system was truly universal. Some claim it was limited to couriers and the nobility. Others believe it extended to merchants and scholars. A few fringe theorists even argue it was used to smuggle secret recipes for fermented mare's milk across borders. But that might just be wishful thinking. What no one debates, though, is its impact. The gerege paved the way for international trade, for diplomacy, for exploration. It turned the chaos of empire into something that, at times, resembled order. And even centuries later, echoes of it remain. In every border crossing, every ink-stamped visa, every awkward line at immigration where you suddenly forget your own birthday. You lie back, letting the warmth of the fire soak into your skin like sleep in liquid form. Outside, the wind combs through the trees, looking for someone to carry. But not you, not tonight. You're home, at least for now. One of the younger couriers begins telling a story, a ridiculous one, about a goat who outwitted 3 bandits using only a bell and sheer spite. You laugh softly. Someone else adds a detail, then another. And just like that, the silence gives way to something richer. You sip the last of your tea, now lukewarm and slightly smoky, and close your eyes for a moment. The weight of the journey slips from your shoulders like a discarded cloak. You are not just a traveler, you are a thread in a larger fabric, a system that once dared to believe the world could be connected, not conquered. And somehow, in this flickering room of strangers, warm with firelight and tales, you believe it too.